Well, so this is a demo for the host project. So you might be wondering, where's the model? This is the model, and these are the pieces of that model. So the concept behind the host project is that an architect would sit down with a refugee, just kind of like what I'm doing right now, and they would be presented with a toy kit, which is this toy kit right here. This is a toy kit. And they would invite the refugee to build their own house. In that way, that refugee can customize and develop their design independent of an architect temporarily, then have the architect review that design. So in a way, it's a means to save manpower and a means to make these types of housing more practical and decentralized, if you will. So what I'm gonna do right now is I'm gonna build the house using the pieces. So these components, these are wall components, and these are window components, and this is a large window component. So what I'm gonna do now is that I'm gonna slot these components slot the pegs of these components into these built-in holes. There you go, just like that. And the idea really is that toys are something that are universally understood, right? Things like toys like Lego. When you see a peg and you see the hole, people quite instinctively understand the objective is to build a house, and that is something that can be communicated regardless of language. It's the notion of visual design. So I'm going to build a window right by this kitchen right here. Some walls. So over here we have our shower and our bathroom unit, and right here we have our kitchen unit, and they're together because of plumbing. So the idea is that we have these unique units, right? And each unit can be assembled and replaced in different hexagonal tiling patterns in order to develop unique configurations that bend and fit around the space that they're given. So I'm gonna make a fire escape door right here. Let's put that here. And you may be wondering what this thing is. So the idea is that because the roofs, they extend outwards like that and cover this area, you create an engawa, or a Japanese style veranda, where the floor kind of protrudes outwards into the outside. In my site here, this garden right here, community garden. So the idea is that these refugees, they have spaces to interact with the communities and spaces to facilitate social interaction, which they may be afraid of doing since they are refugees that have moved far away from their home. These blue columns, these are load-bearing columns. These cannot be removed. The magenta columns, these are non-load-bearing columns. They can be removed and placed, however, on the corners of the components. So this here is a 3-tile house. In the experiments I did, I gave my friends and my mates 4 tiles, 3 tiles, and to experiment with what they would come up with. Let me just move this right here. Slot that in. There we go. So you may be wondering, how do I insert these walls in real life? Because if you think about it, all these components are prefabricated off-site, and in theory they would have a ceiling built into them. So how can you remove a wall without having to remove the entire ceiling. The solution is to have kind of a piston. So let me just demonstrate this right here. This here is a wall. So you would remove the slots like this, track the wall, and pull out the wall like that. Oops. And to insert a wall, you would place it in place, extend it like so, like so, and then you would slot in these little panels on the sides, and these hold up the wall. This one's a bit loose. Hold up the wall like so, and there you go. The wall is extended. The main inspiration for the hexagonal idea was the biomimicry of bees and the shape of their beehives. The hexagon is the mathematically most efficient way to occupy the most amount of space, the least amount of material. So what these white objects are, these are furniture items that are independent of the hexagons. So what these are is that these are, in theory, these furniture items can be requested and they can be allocated based on active needs and wants. So the idea is to turn the house into a living organism that develops and grows over time. So this here is a partition to divide the house. This is heavily influenced by the by Japanese design of shoji, which is an East Asian partition with a translucent paper wall. So the idea is that light is transmitted, but there is still a sense of privacy maintained. This one, coffee table. So my clientele is two parents, one of which has PTSD. They're refugees fleeing from Afghanistan, and they have two children, aged 7 and 8. I've decided to put the parents' room and the children's room in the same room, only divided by a partition, because PTSD may cause the parent to be afraid of being separated from the children. Looks like I missed a column here. Go. These white units, these are storage shelves that kind of clip on to the walls, like so. Let's see if we can find the rest. Go. Here. Yep. There we go. And let's have a kitchen counter right here. Yep. So to walk through this design, we have our entrance over here, and you'll find that these modules, they have they're raised above the ground. This is to prevent flooding. This is to prevent any other soil geographical damage. And this here is elevated so that the client, here's the father for scale. So they would walk up and they would physically have to move outwards to enter the house, and that creates kind of transitioning space despite the limited amount of room. This wall, like this segment here, is 3 meters. So the idea is to create transitioning spaces without by forcing, almost forcing, the user to physically turn and turn. So if you imagine the main path being like this, they would have to move like this, turn, enter, turn again. So these turning motions, they kind of divide up the space, and this applies for whatever direction the user may come from. So let's place him here. Children. I'm afraid I only have one. Oh, never mind. I do have a second child unit. Here we go. Yep. And as for the roofs, the orientation. Yes, the orientation. The orientation of the build is that north is this direction. So the sun will be coming from this way and setting on this way. The windows are not facing east and west, or facing north. This is to prevent harsh sunlight, and the solution to having sunlight is including these these roof modules with built-in skylights. So this way. So for the bedroom module, we have a skylight so that they can wake up to the sun, and that's good for circadian rhythm and regulating stress and cortisol levels. This here is a regular roof tile, and you should notice that that the load-bearing modules, they rest on these corners, and the non-load, and these two are non-load bearing. So what these triangles effectively are cantilevers. And the entrance. Go. Put this away. And next slide, the little gravel texture I have underneath it. Go. Control. There we go. And this is what it will look like at the end. These are the extra parts. And so the idea is that we have refugees, they sit down with architects, and despite the barriers in language, the idea is that the idea is a set of toys visually communicates allows refugees to visually communicate the needs of their family without having to actually verbally communicate. So well, in effect, what I've essentially designed is a toy, really. I've designed less of a house and more of a toy. And the idea is that as our family grows and develops, maybe these kids age and they need their own bedroom, father treats his PTSD and can now sleep separately. So maybe we can add an additional module like this. Maybe I'll put it here. And going back to our wall demo, if you can remember, we can remove these walls without having to remove the ceiling. So these walls on this side can be taken down and new ones can be erected here so that a new room is created, and it adapts, it evolves to coexist with the fluctuating needs of our clientele. So what I envision happening is a sense of emergent design, so that if you imagine our site to be covered by an entire mosaic of hexagons, we can kind of see communities popping up. So if you think about the campsites, in campsites, we orient our tents to face our friends and our family so that we can form these little shelters of communities. This is what I expect to see with this kind of design, so that perhaps we have another house here, another house there, and they orient their entrances to inwards to see each other and form small, tight communities. And the idea is that we have hundreds of these on, not perhaps not 100, but tens of these on the site, and these form these emergent design these emergent communities, organic, evolving organisms almost that are independent of planners and architects, and they kind of thrive and live on their own, which I think makes for more sustainable design, because there's a less need to interfere, less need to allocate more resources, and the community grows based on its active needs instead of having to expend the resources to anticipate what those future needs could be. So if there's an immediate need for a new module can be placed instead of having to pre-plan everything. Yeah, and the idea is that when I was walking around Manchester, I've noticed there were a lot of vacant plots, especially in more rural areas, and I thought that these plots could be used well, not used, these plots could be perhaps not invaded, but make use of by kind of these hexagonal emergent housing we have. And perhaps this not only applies to refugees, but also to perhaps immigrant workers who are in sudden need of housing, but perhaps can't immediately find it because of documentation issues or waiting issues like public housing. Or perhaps this can be applied to seasonal workers, like during harvesting seasons in farms, HGV truck drivers that are coming on a temporary basis because the demand for them fluctuates based on seasonal harvesting and seasonal items, seasonal demand. And yeah, so the core inspirations are biomimicry, beehives, the idea and notion of supply and demand, and my personal experience as an immigrant myself, and the kind of emotions and the needs that are associated with immigration. Yeah, so please, thank you very much for watching my demonstration. I hope you enjoy the rest of my presentation.